I think from a public relations point of view, it's a very dangerous period for Trump, and he's following his time-worn strategy of saying it's not true, fake news. He's been successful in many other circumstances where people thought it was just bluff and braggadocio. He's gotten away with it. So there's hardly room for optimism that this time he might get caught.
John Bolton doesn't merely criticize Trump, he demolishes him. With insider knowledge in hand, Bolton tears down the illusion of strategy, exposing a presidency driven by impulse, ego, and a desperate hunger for applause. His attacks aren't reckless swings, they're precise strikes at the very nerves Trump never wanted touched. The image of toughness unravels, replaced by a portrait of a flailing performer trapped in his own chaos. Each word lands like shrapnel, leaving behind the wreckage of a leadership built entirely on sand.
Are you concerned about the people that are in his current orbit and what they're capable of doing and how they could influence him?
Yes, I think any administration in a second term doesn't attract the quality of people it does in the first. I think the bigger danger, though, is that Trump will insist in staffing a second term on personal loyalty to him.
Bolton opens by tearing down the myth of Trump as a master strategist. He recalls watching the president treat policy briefings like TV episodes, skipping past the details and clinging only to the moments that could grab headlines. To Bolton, it was like watching someone skim a flight manual and then claim they could pilot the plane. The absurdity speaks for itself. A commander-in-chief more obsessed with camera angles than with nuclear codes.
This is something the Wall Street Journal reported some time ago. Trump immediately sued them for libel, denying that he wrote the letter, drew the letter, signed the letter, knew anything about the letter. It's going to be interesting to see how he reacts later today and what the White House says. I'm sure they're going to say it's totally fake.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. From there, Bolton turns to Trump's obsession with spectacle. He portrays him as a man so captivated by photo ops that he'd gladly sacrifice substance for the chance to be photographed pointing at something that merely looked important. Bolton ridicules this fixation on theatrics, likening Trump to a stage actor more interested in props than in the plot. To Bolton, the tragedy was that national security itself became just another backdrop, a set piece for Trump's ego to perform in front of.
I think what he wants to do right now at some point is he wants to win a Nobel Peace Prize. He tried in Ukraine, Russia, that somehow that didn't work out. I can't imagine why. He's tried between India and Pakistan after the recent terrorist attack in Kashmir. That didn't work out. He thought he could bring the Iranians to a deal, maybe get the Nobel Peace Prize for that. That didn't work out. Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize, and he hasn't gotten one, and he's really upset by it.
The roast sharpens when Bolton turns to Trump's dealings with foreign leaders. He reveals the strange contrast in Trump's behavior, offering authoritarian figures the kind of reverence he never showed America's allies. Bolton mocks the absurdity of a president who treated global summits like fan conventions, chasing autographs instead of pursuing strategy. The tough guy persona Trump worked so hard to maintain collapses in Bolton's telling, exposing a man starstruck by strong men and desperate for acceptance in their club.
To adversaries of the United States around the world, that their adversaries in American government can be left that exposed. I've made my own arrangements now in lieu of the Secret Service. It was something that showed, I think, the character of Trump the man, that he did it, and not just against me, but a number of others. So this, as I say, it's going to have an effect on decision-making in Trump's own administration when people who had our jobs see what happens to them if you fall out.
Bolton doesn't stop there. He shines a light on the chaos of Trump's decision-making, where late-night impulses often erased months of planning. Advisors weren't scrambling to carry out policy, they were scrambling to decode cryptic tweets. Bolton skewers the dysfunction, painting a picture of a White House where national priorities were announced in 280 characters, leaving staff to wonder if today's strategy came from a classified briefing or a cable news rant. The joke lands because the absurdity is undeniable. Policy by whim, government by improv.
So is this just another attempt for Trump to shake it off? And I wonder if this strategy of deny, deny, deny has failed him.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how his MAGA base reacts to it. They have certainly taken his lead on a lot of things. He says something never happened, and they just accept it. But here, I think part of his trouble is that the MAGA base was responsible for keeping the Epstein.
Bolton's signature jab hits Trump's obsession with loyalty. He mocks the endless tests, the demand for praise, and the paranoia around anyone slow to clap. To Bolton, Trump judged competence not by results, but by flattery, running a court instead of a cabinet. He then shifts to Trump's fixation on military power, a man dazzled by parades and missile launches, yet uninterested in strategy or consequences. Bolton ridicules it as a child demanding fireworks without caring where the sparks fall. Finally, he targets Trump's negotiations, laughing at the self-proclaimed dealmaker who mistook flattery for victory and headlines for treaties.
He did not, I think, participate in any way in attempting to deceive the Iranians by dragging out negotiations so Israel could get prepared. Last Thursday night, Marco Rubio issued a statement saying it's entirely a unilateral Israeli action. Did not have any customary words about the U.S. support for Israel. Now, Trump probably didn't read that statement, but Rubio would not have put it out in those terms unless Trump approved it. So he was standing away from Israel. Next morning, he wakes up, it looks pretty good. It looks like the Israelis are having some success. So the first thing Trump says in some tweet is, of course, he supports the Israeli action. Later in the day, characterized the initial results as excellent. By the end of the day, he was saying the stock market would go up. He's trying to...
Bolton dismantles the myth of Trump as a master negotiator, noting how often he gave more than he got just to claim a win. The irony, Bolton says, is that Trump built his brand on deals, yet his presidency was defined by giveaways. He then mocks Trump's inability to read the room, his gaffes, off-script rants, and bluster that alienated allies while emboldening enemies. It wasn't strategy gone wrong, Bolton argues, but no strategy at all. A man mistaking noise for leadership. The comedy sharpens. Trump saw himself as a statesman, but Bolton paints him as a loud tourist shouting in a museum. The roast widens to Trump's domestic chaos, hammering the record turnover of staff. Bolton likens it to running a government by speed dating, new faces every week, scandals every month. The revolving door wasn't an accident, he insists, but the system itself.
I've had calls from people that I've never met before saying, it's outrageous what Trump did, how can we help? I don't know anybody other than diehard Trump supporters who think it was a good idea.
You've been at the receiving end of Iranian death threats. Do you feel exposed and unsafe?
Sure, at this point. I mean, I had protection from the Secret Service going back to late 2021 that President Biden ordered because of this threat. I mean, we're not talking, I should say here, about internet chatter or, anonymous death threats. This was based on substantial intelligence that we and other countries had collected on this. But on what one might have thought was a pretty busy inauguration day, Trump had the time to cancel my Secret Service protection, which nobody's entitled to anything in my view, but it sends...
Bolton digs into Trump's handling of crisis, recalling how moments that required calm and clarity were met with bluster and denial. He laughs at the irony of a president who turned every emergency into a stage to promote himself, branding instead of leading. From there, Bolton skewers Trump's obsession with legacy, dreaming of monuments and history books, yet leaving behind investigations, impeachments, and chaos. Trump imagined marble statues, but delivered only paperwork stamped with lawsuits. The roast cuts deeper as Bolton exposes Trump's reliance on television as his true measure of success. Ratings mattered more than briefings, cable hosts more than advisors. Bolton mocks the idea of a presidency run by remote control, where policy followed pundits on screen. The satire lands because it's true. Trump measured power by Nielsen, not by governance.
I don't fully understand why Trump has taken the position, this is all fake, we ought to put this behind us, there's nothing there. If he had nothing to hide, I would think he'd want to be the first one to say, look, here's, yes, I've said I knew Jeffrey Epstein. I also said I kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago at one point. Here's everything there is to know, and now let's move on. But he's not doing that. He's saying it's a fake scandal, fake news, and it doesn't want to disclose anymore. And that leads people who worry about transparency in government, who have been demanding transparency on Epstein, now to say, well, it's not just the Biden administration. Now the Trump administration doesn't want to make.
The roast sharpens as Bolton dissects Trump's communication style, mocking the endless superlatives, contradictions, and proclamations that unraveled within days. He frames it as a presidency written in pencil, constantly erased and redrawn. The comedy isn't subtle. Trump spoke with the confidence of permanence, but governed with the instability of a weather vane. Bolton then circles back to Trump's greatest fear: irrelevance. The irony, he says, is that the man who craved the spotlight is destined for a legacy of noise, not substance. The show goes on, but the audience drifts away. Bolton leaves the roast unfinished because, with Trump, the comedy writes itself daily. Scandals don't stop, blunders don't pause, and contradictions keep stacking higher. There is no conclusion, only another act, another unraveling, another reminder that history always catches up, no matter how loud the shouting.
Trump views international relations through the prism of his personal relations with foreign leaders. So he thinks if he has good relations with Putin, then the U.S. has good relations with Russia. That's not true, but that's what he thinks. He thinks he and Putin are friends. By contrast, he has not had a good relationship with Zelensky since the famous perfect phone call of 2019 that led to his first impeachment. And so therefore, he thinks that if he gives his friends some advantages, like all the concessions he's already made on Ukraine, that will help bring the peace. He wants this war behind him.
Bolton doesn't step off the stage. He leans in, determined to peel back more layers of chaos he saw firsthand. He starts with Trump's disdain for reading, mocking how briefings had to be reduced to visuals, maps, or bullet points short enough for a TV chyron. The absurdity, Bolton notes, was preparing security analyses doomed to be ignored without colorful images. He recalls meetings derailed by tangents on crowd sizes, celebrity feuds, or ratings, while advisors tensed, struggling to redirect a man whose focus shifted like a remote flipping channels. The humor lands because it reveals a White House where the leader couldn't sit still long enough to absorb what mattered. Bolton then pivots to Trump's transactional view of alliances, mocking how centuries-old partnerships were reduced to accounting ledgers. He ridicules NATO being treated like a country club where dues determined respect, exposing the shallowness of a president who mistook financial leverage for strategy, leaving allies baffled and adversaries emboldened.
The other plans, too, even though Republicans have a majority in Congress, it's a very narrow majority. There are a lot of challenges facing the United States around the world, in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Asia, with China's threats to Taiwan and the South China Sea. So there's a lot going on simultaneously, and this is the first time in over 100 years we've had a president who is not only a new president, but is simultaneously a lame duck president because he can't run for another term. So very hard to predict.
Bolton widens the lens to Trump's relentless self-promotion on the world stage. He recalls summits where the president seemed more focused on photo ops than outcomes, lampooning the image of Trump elbowing his way to the front, desperate for the camera, while real discussions unfolded behind him. Bolton laughs at promises blurted out without preparation, commitments made without consultation, and sudden reversals that left diplomats scrambling to make sense of his words. He jokes that watching Trump negotiate was like watching someone play chess by moving pieces at random, then declaring it a master plan. Bolton then exposes the fragile pride beneath it all, how flattery from foreign leaders could bend Trump's stance, while the slightest criticism unleashed disproportionate fury. He paints a portrait of a president guided not by principle, but by ego management, a self-styled tough guy undone by the lightest touch of vanity.
Putin doesn't think they're friends. He thinks Trump is an easy mark, and he thinks he's manipulable. And he has been manipulating him, as when Putin said several weeks ago, Trump was right, that if he had been president, there wouldn't have been a war in Ukraine. Well, maybe so, maybe not, but Trump loved to hear that. Then they released the hostage Mark Foley. Then Lukashenko and Belarus released another American hostage. This is the manipulation at work. Now, I think Putin's got to be very careful that he doesn't overstep it here and risk losing some of the concessions.
Bolton sharpens his focus on Trump's impatience with process, recalling how the machinery of government frustrated a man who demanded instant results. He mocks the tantrums that followed, likening them to a child shaking a vending machine when the snack didn't drop fast enough. The satire bites because it shows the danger of impatience disguised as leadership. Bolton then turns to Trump's inability to handle criticism, skewering the endless tirades against the press. He portrays a president more obsessed with headlines than policy, spending hours feuding with journalists while crises went unanswered. The comedy works because it's rooted in truth, the presidency reduced to vanity wars. Bolton closes by reflecting on Trump's compulsive need for attention, imagining him years later still tweeting into the void, convinced the world is listening, oblivious to silence. It's a haunting, yet hilarious picture of a man whose identity rests entirely on performance. And still, Bolton avoids a final ending because the material never stops. Each headline is another punchline, each blunder another act. The dismantling of Trump is renewable, fueled by the man who refuses to leave the stage.